Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's USALI 12 edition preview series webinar, New Energy Reporting and Sustainability Benchmarking Standards for the Lodging Industry. I'm Barbara Semeraro, the HFTP Chapter Relations Coordinator, along with Victoria Schaefer, who is the HFTP Senior Membership Manager, and we're hosting today's webinar. HFTP and the Global Finance Committee, also known as GFC, are preparing for the fall 2022 release of the 12th revision edition of the Uniform Systems of Accounts for the Lodging Industry, also known as USALI or USALI. Prior to publishing the newest edition, HFTP and the GFC recruited a group of leading industry stakeholders to participate in the review of exposure drafts. With these exposure drafts, they are requesting comments for consideration ahead of the release of the 12th edition publication. Now, our first exposure draft is for the new section titled Energy, Water, and Waste. In updating the USALI to the 12th revised edition, HFTP and the GFC reached out to partner with the AHLA Sustainability Committee to enhance the Utilities Section 9 in the USALI 11th edition to become the new Energy, Water, and Waste of the USALI 12th edition. The new EWW-Schedule 9 and the new EWW metrics section will align with existing energy industry metrics. Significant changes are reclassifying waste expenses from the property operations and maintenance schedule. Also expanding energy and water with more detailed accounts, descriptions, and metrics. So today we are joined by the AHLA Sustainability Subcommittee member, Amy Byrne, Industry Environmental Consultant, Eric Ricout, USALI Global Finance Committee member, Ralph Miller, USALI Global Finance Committee member, Agnes DeFranco, and the USALI Global Finance Committee co-chair, Raymond Martz. I now hand the webinar over to Raymond to introduce our panel members and begin the discussion.
Sure. Well, thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Victoria, and the entire HFTP team for agreeing to host this webinar, which we think is really important for the industry. And we'll go through that in a moment. And we want to thank everyone for joining us today. This is an important webinar on the new sustainability benchmarking and recording standards for the global lodging industry. I am Ray Martz, the chair of the Global Finance Committee, or the GFC, and I'm also the Chief Financial Officer for Pebblebrook Hotel Trust, and we are an owner based in the Washington, D.C. region. So the Global Finance Committee, or the GFC, is a co-sponsored group of HFTP and the AHLA. The GFC consists of about 30 members, and we represent the global hotel industry's leading brands, managers, hotel owners, advisors, and academics. And with me today is some of our esteemed panel members. We have Agnes DeFranco, in addition to being the head of the EWW Committee for Energy, Water, and Waste. She's also a professor at the Conrad NH Distinguished Chair at the University of Houston. Ralph Miller is the lead on the GFC Communications Subcommittee, and he's also president of Integrated Hospitality Management, a Canadian-based consultancy specializing in operations, restructuring, and other advisory work. We also have Amy Bourne. She is a senior manager of sustainability and supplier diversity for Marriott International. And we have Eric Riccardi. He's the founder and CEO of Greenview, who is joining us today from Singapore. So he had to dial in the furthest for us. So thank you, Eric, I know it's late there, it's early here.
Pleasure.
But we enjoy having you here. So what are we going to do today? So we're going to, on our agenda slide, we're going to go through, discuss the role of the Global Finance Committee, kind of how we got to this, and how we developed the EWW standards. And then we'll discuss and why these are important to you. So why it's important if you're a hotel manager, and why is it important if you're a hotel owner? We'll walk through these areas as well as the timeline of how these will be implemented. And then most importantly, we're going to make sure we allocate time for Q&A. So certainly there's ways to also send in your questions along the way. We know there's a lot of new materials here. Some of this may be new to a lot of folks, so please send in your questions. That's why we're doing this now before a lot of these standards are finalized, because we want to give you in the hotel community time to learn and adapt to this. So next slide. Thanks. As we work through this, one is we received a lot of feedback from a lot of the major brands. So on the committee, we have Hilton and Marriott and IHG, Accor, Viceroy, really the major brands that have participated in giving their feedback based on the variety of countries they work in, feedback from customers in other areas. And we also have several owners that are also on committee, and the ownership committee contributed things that we're seeing, whether it's from the government side or from also our customers and lenders in all those areas. So as a result of that, and as well as the sustainability committee for the AHLA. So this was definitely a group effort with a lot of different perspectives in terms of putting this materials together. So it wasn't just a couple of folks going in a room. It was a large group, a very diverse group. And we took some time to develop these. And we published these results in the EWW exposure draft, which Ralph will cover in a minute of where to review that and provide commentary. The next slide. If we go next slide, Barbara. So, and our members will talk in more detail, but one of the major changes in this area is we moved waste out of property operations and maintenance, and we can talk about why we did that. So now we have energy, water, and waste all in one section, which we think bringing that together allows hotel managers and owners to really truly better understand all their energy usage and their waste and get a better handle on it. And then as part of this effort, we also look to develop standardized metrics for hotels of all sizes to contribute. So there's a lot of new metrics and details in there, which you can find in the exposure draft, as well as other tools and resources. We certainly acknowledge that some of the larger brands like Marriott and Hilton may have resources on the sustainability side to do a lot of this through their firms. And certainly if you want to go in that direction, we provide you some of the resources for that. But the idea behind all of this was we wanted to make it so an individual hotel could, with the personnel at the hotel, could put the stats together themselves. They didn't have to go out to hire an engineer. The property controller and the property engineer could put together these metrics themselves. And certainly if hotels want to go beyond that level to more detailed carbon reporting and a lot of those areas, we provide the tools to do that and certainly encourage that. But at least for this draft now, which will be appearing in the 12th edition of USALI, it's really stuff that the individual hotel can certainly track and get together. Next slide. So, and this isn't just another area we found is this is no longer just a check the box sort of initiative as was in the past. We're getting more and more requirements from government entities to report sustainability numbers, what you're using in energy. Many cities and states have that. And also governments, it is also a big customer of this for a lot of hotels, and governments are increasingly asking what hotels are doing on sustainability. And we're also seeing more and more on the corporate travel side with planners. A lot of major corporate users of travel, like Google and Microsoft and Accenture, as part of their decision on what hotels to stay at, sustainability is a big part of that. And Amy will cover some of what Marriott is seeing globally on that side. So this is something where it's no longer check the box. It's something that needs to be done for customers. And if you're not going to do it, you're going to be behind. So this is why now it's important to develop these standards. And with that, I think that's a good segue into our first poll question. And we go to the next slide. Is that popped up there? And our first poll question is, does your hotel have a sustainability program in place? So the options you enter yes, no, I am not sure, or no, but we are considering one in the next 12 months. So if anyone, the users on the call can click on the answer, we thought this would be a good, interesting, good first question to see. Good. And the results are, so does your hotel currently have a sustainability program? 45% said yes, 21% said no, 16% said I don't know, I'm not sure, and 18% said no, but we are considering one in the next 18 or 12 months. Thanks. And with that, I'd like to turn the call over to Ralph to talk about really other interested parties and next steps for small and medium operators. Ralph?
There we go. So thanks, Ray. All right. So when in working on the section, we wanted to make sure that we developed programming and we developed changes that were applicable and fairly easy to comply with. Every day we encounter good and bad news about environmental sustainability from all points of the compass. And on the good side, I mean, earlier this week on one of my news feeds, I saw the announcement of a planned April 2022 opening of a net zero energy hotel in New Haven, Connecticut. And so 10 years ago, nobody would have thought of trying to build a hotel or open a hotel with a net zero energy mandate. So, we want to make sure that that the changes to the USALI are supportable and support both large and small lodging operators. And when we're evaluating sustainability performance, we want to be able to track trends, and we want to be able to deal with information requests that will come to us from customers, from government agencies, regulators, shareholders. And there's another important stakeholder in all of this, and that's employees. When we're trying to hire millennials, and if they have a choice of working for a company that's, in their view, more environmentally responsible than some others, that impacts their choice. So, some of this even goes to employee culture. I think Ray's has already said that, larger hotel operators may have some pretty sophisticated systems for tracking, consumption and providing information. That they have access to, potentially environmental scientists in order to do these long calculations for carbon footprint and stuff. While smaller hotels don't have access to that technology, they don't have access to that scale, but still, they need the ability to be able to capture consumption, calculate utilization metrics, and be able to track things over time so that they can monitor and see positive or negative performance, and then take corrective action. At the end of the day, there's a net cost to all of this programming, right? I mean, if we can reduce our consumption in markets that have rising prices, there's a cost saving piece around our consumption and utilization. There are costs of putting programs in place, to be sure, but as we move forward, I think it's going to be important that we have systems in place so that we can monitor that trend performance. Next slide, please. So as we as we go through. I mean, so we have significant changes. The whole section's a rewrite. And so, yes, we reclassified waste and brought it in from property operations and maintenance, because waste and how we handle waste has a significant impact on the environment and on our planet's sustainability. So we brought it over. We expanded the accounts. We expanded some of the definitions so that we had classifications that more easily enable us to capture data for us to move forward with some trend analysis. So, you know, on the way through, you will find that there's a few more classifications, but by the same time, we think that it makes sense to compile the data this way. So next slide, please. If we look at what the new Schedule 9 will be, we see that within energy, we've got a number of classifications for electricity, fuels, gases, and district energy. We've got something for renewable energy and all of our vehicle fuels. So we've kind of grouped these things because these classifications have common characteristics in terms of calculations, that you might want to do in the future regarding carbon footprint. Water and sewer, we've gathered them by source. And then within waste, you'll see that we've got a number of sub-classifications in waste that didn't exist before, in terms of whether we're sending waste to landfill or incinerating it, whether we're recycling or whether we're composting or diverting some other way. So within the schedule, we're providing for more classifications that are meaningful in future use and for development of, like I said, carbon footprint and those sorts of things. Next slide, please. Specifically with fuels, gases, and direct energy, we want to make sure that we pull in the components that have the same type of carbon use, right? So in here, we'll bring in our natural gas, butane, fuel oils, and some things in terms of district energy, because in producing these district energy peak components, the providers usually burn some sort of fuel or gas in creating them. So again, we've been trying to group things so that the groupings reflect the environmental impact as much as other things. Next slide, please. Renewable energy is kind of the first time that we're seeing this, and more and more we're finding that folks are using energy that is more solar, more wind powered. There's always been renewable energy from hydro, but there are new projects around. You're also able to buy, if you will, outside renewable energy certificates in order to kind of guarantee what the source of the energy is, so that it flows into the calculations and the metrics in a positive way. Consistent throughout the USALI, of course, capital expenditures go to the balance sheet, right? I mean, their capital costs, and we're not dealing in Schedule 9 with capital costs, but we want to make sure that if there's carbon credits and things, that they're tracked as a result of the work we do here. Next slide, please. We've touched on the use of operating metrics, and so we see metrics as a way of kind of leveling that playing field, where we through common size or some frequency based metrics, we kind of remove the size of the property, you know, whether you get down to percentage of revenue calculations, or whether you get into performance-based or frequency-based measurements per occupied room. And, you know, I mean, and if you really got a lot of digits in your in your calculator, you know, get down to cost per guest, and cost, and then consumption. So we want to be able to build a model and provide building blocks in order for us to get to those types of metrics, because that's the type of reporting that's going to be required as we go forward. Could I get the next slide, please? In terms of you know, just some of these metrics, I mean, on the cost side, you know, cost per unit, you know, kilowatt hour, gallon, waste cost, and these things will be different by all of the different cost classifications that are in Schedule 9. And then there's the consumption metrics, right? I mean, how much did we use per square foot? How much did we use per occupied room? And as I said, I mean, eventually we might get to the point of how much per guest. Lots of definitions to come. You know, just a note about carbon footprint. You know, we are not within the 12th edition going to get to the point where we're going to provide detailed calculations for carbon emissions or greenhouse gases or carbon footprint. What we are doing with Schedule 9 and with the accumulation of data on consumption is we are moving in the direction and giving people the opportunity of measuring consumption. That consumption would factor into such a calculation, but initially we want to see the development of trends over time, where we're seeing either more, you know, consumption of better quality for the environment fuels, and you know, better management of waste over time. So we want to see that. If someone actually has to go and calculate their carbon footprint, well, that's going to require a little more data, and probably one of those data scientists or someone on the consulting side that knows how to do all of those calculations. But we want to be able to have the industry ready to be able to provide the data for the inputs to that. And we want that to be able to happen across all sizes of properties throughout the industry. And we think that this accomplishes that. So I guess next slide. So in terms of timeline for the 12th edition, you know, currently the Global Finance Committee is completing their work on certain sections. And as those sections are complete, we will be sending out the major changes in exposure drafts to industry, you know, industry associates, if you will, you know, industry partners that are interested, have expressed interest in reviewing these exposure drafts. So we'll be doing that for probably in through the spring on a number of different sections. Currently, the exposure draft is out and in play for the new EWW section. And we're looking forward to receiving any feedback and comments. You know, we are looking to publish in the fall of 2022. Between now and then, there will be some more HFTP education sessions, and HFTP will be providing resources, you know, especially through the subscription model. And we're anticipating that the effective date for USALI 12 will be January 1, 2024. I guess those are my comments. I'll pass the baton to Dr. DeFranco. Agnes.
Thank you, Ralph. Well, from the educational perspective, HFTP's course purpose is always to lead and advance the hospitality profession by providing a forum for continuous learning and knowledge sharing. So in other words, HFTP strives for its membership to always be informed and have the latest knowledge. So the USALI that we talked about right now is the guidance for all our lodging properties to report our financial performance. So HFTP has a dedicated page on its website for all USALI 12th edition information. And this is an invaluable resource. And as our committee continues to work and finalize the 12th edition, if there are any great resources, they will also be posted on this site. So please bookmark this page. And of course, HFTP, as Ralph said, will always continue to provide virtual opportunities through other webinars or hangouts on other major changes in the USALI. So on the next slide, you will see that anything is only as good as we can understand it and how we're going to use it. So knowledge sharing or education is very important. And in information sharing, we have two major audiences. And the first one, obviously, is the industry and the professionals in our industry for the continuing education. So for the industry and the professionals, HFTP is sharing the information in a more interactive and asynchronous way, because we know that everybody is busy. So within HFTP's Academy, there are two certificate courses on the USALI. So the first one is called the USALI Theory, where the USALI is presented in 4 modules. The first one is a summary operating statement. The second one is all the undistributed departments. The third one is the non-operating income and expenses, allocated departments, and also the gross versus net reporting for revenues. And finally, all the ratios and metrics. The second certificate course is the USALI practice course. Now it's the same 4 modules, but now numbers and calculations are included to enhance the understanding of the concepts presented in the USALI course earlier. And it's important not only for the people working in the accounting office to know the USALI, but really all the department heads need to know about that too, and all our associates, so that they can understand how each person, each and every one in a lodging property can contribute to the bottom line. Now, of course, as the world changes, especially in sustainability, how we all are going to do our part and measure our success, not only by dollars, but also by how we are protecting our environment, just like what Ray and Rob had shared with us, and also what Amy and Eric will also expand on. All of these will be in this EWW-Schedule in the 12th edition. And by the way, HFTP also partners with Hotsteds in a 3rd course called benchmarking to share how a property can benchmark itself against a comp set and make data-driven managerial decisions. So again, that's why you are here today in this webinar. Now, in the next slide, you will see that there's a slightly different course, because now with the 12th edition coming, you may wonder, well, should I even take the 11th edition courses? Because wouldn't my knowledge become obsolete? Well, as Ralph says earlier, the 12th edition will be published in late summer or early fall of 2022. And it will be in effect January 1st of 2024. So that'll be 2 years from now. So HFTP has plans for 3 courses. The first one is a short bridge course for those who have taken the 11th edition. This bridge course will highlight all the changes. So anyone who has taken the 11th edition courses will only have to take the short course to update all the information to the 12th edition. Now, of course, for those who are not too familiar with the 11th edition, they can then take the 2 new courses of theories and practice, and those are ready to debut in early 2023. Now, so if you have employees who don't know much about the 11th edition, they can take the 11th edition courses now and then take the short bridge course late next year, and they'll be all set. And if you have new employees who might be from another industry and they don't understand the nuances of the hotel industry, they can get the knowledge now, start taking the 11th edition theory and practice courses, and then when the bridge courses come along in late fall of 2022, your employees again will be all set. Now, in our next slide, you will see that the second audience for knowledge sharing is what I do every day, is the academy, the colleges and the universities. Now, in some universities, we include USALI as a required or recommended text. And now that HFTP has made the USALI in an electronic format, it is also very affordable. And it is important for our students who are our future hospitality workforce to know more about the USALI. And on the next slide, you will see that for those of you on the next slide, thank you. For all of us, I should say, who teach and do research, any data that we get from STR, CBRE, or Hotstats, they all follow the USALI. So here is one research example that when the 11th edition became effective on January 1st of 2015, we have a new information and telecommunication system schedule. So using the data from CBRE, we mapped how ITS expenses were being reported for the first 3 years after the change. So I can't wait to have the data available in a few years to do a study on this EWW. So from an educational perspective, with the USALI, one standard, both the industry and academy are speaking the same language. And especially in this relatively new age of sustainability, it's important for all of us to know what to measure and what to report in energy, water, and waste consumption. So I think it's time for us to do our second poll question. So we're going to ask Victoria to help us put it out. So the question says, which of the following is not a more significant change to the Schedule 9 of EWW? And I think Ralph covered earlier for us. The first one is reclassifying and expanding the waste expense classifications. The second option is expanding energy and water expense classifications. The third is offering new EWW metrics to align with current industry information. And the last one is requirement that all metrics must be reported alongside the summary operating statement as of January 1st, 2024. So which of this is not a significant change? So if you can click your selections and we'll see what the results show. Okay, Victoria, if you have most of the answers, if we can take a look at the answers. Perfect. So 43% of you got the correct one, is number 4. That is no requirement that all the metrics must be reported alongside the SOS, but it is good for us to start doing them as soon as possible so we can get used to it and know how to report them. So thank you for participating in this poll question. And now I'm going to turn it over to Amy to talk to us about how we can put this in action.
Great. Thanks so much, Agnes. And hello, everyone. Great to be here today. As I'm listening to the webinar, one of the first things that comes to mind that I just want to share is, within the hospitality sector and the companies that you see on the screen here, we have this amazing ability to share. And really within the hospitality sector, we are so fortunate that we are, very much of the mentality of, lifting all boats with the tide and really wanting to, from a sustainability perspective, work together to really get alignment. And so we can really all advance together in this space. And I have to say this latest, effort with EWW and USALI is just yet another example of all of my industry peers coming together to really identify the importance of this information, really making it uniform to be applicable across the sector, and really just coming together for the better good of all of our companies, and of course, sustainability and the health of our planet. So I just really want to first and foremost take the opportunity of how important this new addition is with this new section, and the importance of the Sustainability Committee coming together with the Finance Committee. And even though it did take a few years and we still have some work to do before it's all in place, it really just is such a monumental effort. And I really hope that other sectors that are trying to address the inherently challenging space of sustainability take a lesson from this, and we'll see progress sector-wide, not only in hospitality but in other sectors as well. But as I said, this space is inherently challenging. The tracking and reporting of energy, water, and waste is, challenging whether you have 2 hotels in your portfolio or, almost 8,000 as Marriott does. So recognizing that and recognizing the need for us to really all get on the same page and give our hotels the opportunity to, from a financial perspective and a consumption perspective, really have a clear understanding of, what's working operationally in the hotel, what's not, being able to identify anomalous data and really understand, if the hotel is being operated in the best way possible. So really excited to see, some of the elements that we've been incorporating for many years now in this uniform section and really wanting to see those benefits pass throughout the sector. So this is, super important just from, at the core of sustainability, operational excellence and efficiency. But I think really when you take it from a business perspective, we have seen the demand for this information from our corporate customers as well as the investor community literally grow exponentially over the last few years. We are up to reporting carbon and water footprint data to over 270 of our corporate customers. And they're wanting to know that, and they're wanting to know even more granular data about some of our energy, water, and waste consumption, some of our operational programs at our hotels. But it's just so important that we have the clear understanding and the clear ability to pass this information on to our customers. We responded to 5,000 RFPs that were valued over $5 billion in 2019 for our customers that are wanting this information. And so just from a core business perspective, I can't remember if it was Ray or Ralph earlier, but to excel in this space and really expand your business, this is no longer a table stakes request. This is really becoming the new normal. And if you don't have the tools in place, if you're not implementing, this upcoming EWW section and doing it consistently and properly, you're not going to be able to meet those demands and, really see the revenue pile up, as a result of that. We actually just completed an exercise with our hotels for the hotels that aren't actually able to provide this information to those 270 customers. What is the revenue at stake for them? And it is in the millions of dollars at the hotel level. So really understanding that, again, this is becoming the new normal. This is something that you need to easily be able to generate and report out to corporate customers. And even, leisure travelers are becoming more interested in this information too, for you able to provide on your websites or other forums to convey how the hotel is being operated, hopefully, from a sustainable fashion. It's just becoming more and more important. And as I said, we're at 270 customers. I fully believe that at the end of 2020, we'll be, at close to 400. I mean, it's just every day these requests are coming in. So I can't iterate, from a business perspective, how important this information is. So one last thing, too, as we are obviously, as I said, sharing all this information and working very, collaboratively in this space. At the end of the day, we are still, competing for business. And so it does become a differentiator. And it's so important for our customers to be able to compare our hotels apples to apples. So if you're reporting in a way that's not in line with the EWW, and then you have a hotel that or company that is, obviously that's going to be very difficult for our customers to digest and really make the best decision if they're looking to make a sustainable purchase for a stay. So I think I'll probably leave it there. Just want to reiterate and congrats to the committees and really just encourage the folks on the call to digest this information and put it in place as it makes sense for your company. So thank you. And I think I'm responsible for our third poll question. Come up here in 1 second. Third and final. Okay, so which of the following statements are true regarding the changes proposed to the new Schedule 9 EWW? First, we have hotels are increasingly required to report to customers, investors, and regulators on their sustainability information. Cooperative effort of HFTP and AHLA. Members of the GFC include the major hotel brands, managers, owners, and advisors. The GFC solicited feedback from industry leaders on sustainability and environmental reporting, including Greenview, or all of the above. So we'll give a few seconds to get those answers. All right, so almost everyone got this one right. Yes, it is indeed all of the above. So hopefully that information is good for you to know. And I'm going to now pass it over to Eric for some final thoughts from his perspective.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Amy. And thanks everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Also, that was a first that I'm proud of, to be having my company listed on a poll question. So thank you for that. It's a great plug. So I'm calling in here from Singapore. There is nothing I'd rather be doing on a Friday night than talking about sustainability metrics, because that's what we do all day and been doing for 12 plus years now. And this is a really big change that we've seen. As Amy mentioned, there's so much increasing pressure from this. There's so much request. Everybody wants to see this information. We've been in a privileged position as well, because hotel chains that are global have to gather this data across the world. And so we have already been doing a lot of industry benchmarking on energy, water, carbon, and now coming next year, waste, receiving data for 20,000 hotels. And the benchmarks are freely available through Cornell University's Center of Hospitality Research. So you can go check it out. So now there is some presence there, but the most important is this is a common denominator globally. And so these metrics, this schedule, these figures are something that every hotel is going to need to do across the world for those same reasons: regulatory pressures, customer pressures, investor pressures, and just good business. I mean, it makes sense, and we do see this a lot, to where the basic tracking of energy, water, and waste can be valuable on its own. Catching an undetected leak in a pipe from the pool, because you're tracking it, which would have otherwise gone unnoticed for months, is a payback right there of just doing this. And so there's a lot there. And in terms of a global perspective, we know that this is going to become more complicated. The metrics are becoming more prescriptive. We are leading toward carbon calculation and carbon emissions, which is the primary one of everybody's discussion. And so I think going forward, the most important message is that we are coming up the 95th anniversary of USALI in the 12th edition. This is the first edition, call it, of these metrics. And maybe we've been doing this for 10 years for carbon and energy, water, maybe 1 year for waste. It's going to evolve. And so this is going to get more complicated. The way that energy is going to be accounted for is going to expand. And there's going to be a lot more need for clarification. But this is the first step. And so the more important thing is, if everybody can start measuring this, start asking the questions, start understanding the data and how they work, they're going to be better prepared for these changes that are going to come, because these changes are not just for accounting. These are changes in CapEx. These are changes in expenditures. These are expenditures in decoupling things like energy expense from, or energy cost, or cost of renewables from utilities. And so all of this in the near future will come, and hotels will have to grapple with this, as a lot of other businesses do. So this is a really good step, and I congratulate USALI and the Global Finance Committee, AHLA's committee, for getting this in, and an honor to be on this and be part of this. So thank you very much. Now back to Ray.
Well, thank you, Eric. Well, that's great. Well, now we're open to up to Q&A, and we've been receiving a lot of questions in, which is great here on a Friday morning. We're probably not going to get to all the questions, so if you did send one over and we don't get to it, please don't take it personally. We're going to try to do our best to respond here. So let's get started here. One of the questions is on EV stations, so electric charging stations for electric cars. The question is, how do you record it? Where does it go? What do you do about it? Since there's increasing need. So a couple of things. First is this will depend on the nature of the relationship. Do you own the EV station? Is this a lease arrangement? That will determine a lot of the factors, but right now that's one determination. But if you are purchasing these EV stations, which we have actually a number of our hotels, yes, we do record it in our energy costs. Will be an EWW, will be recorded there. One best practice we found is to get a separate meter. That way you can better track the usage there, which helps you when reporting back versus some of the sustainability measures. But there's a whole host of a lot of different questions, and there are a lot of different ways to handle that. But maybe I could ask Eric, from your standpoint, aside from the accounting of how EV stations should be handled, what do you see as some of the best practices in your work with other hotels about how they are addressing EV stations and their approach to that?
Thanks, Brad. I think EV stations are a matter of helping electrify the way energy is distributed in general. And so the electrification of vehicles is an important one, because the linchpin of decarbonization is the electric power grid going renewable and things going more electric to begin with. And so that's a key, and that's one of the reasons that it has been a common best practice that hotels are actually required or requested, as one of the questions that Amy was alluding to, where they asked, do you have EV charging stations? There's obviously the emissions on the ground of the other types of emissions, but for the greenhouse gas emissions is one. Now we understand that this then creates an issue, which is part of this complexity of energy, which is now suddenly you have an increased energy consumption for vehicles, which may not be tied to the guest room, may not be tied to the guest experience, may be completely separate. But those are the kind of things and kind of questions that as we get into this more, we can start exploring. And Ray, you said it correctly. Sub-metering it now becomes more important to understand where the energy is distributed within the building, which is one of the main challenges that we have, for example, is a guest room night versus meeting space usage. Each one of those has its respective energy usage, but sub-metering is going to help solve these issues going forward, not only for energy per water and actually for waste as well.
Great. On to the next question. The question is EWW still part of the property operations profit calculation? So I reinterpret that question as, is EWW still part of the expenses to derive gross operating profit? And the answer is yes, it is. Really what this change for EWW is really get all the energy, water, and waste costs into a separate department, so you can better track it. Again, taking waste out of PO&M, which was buried in there, to understand a little bit better. This will be still part of your expense to determine the operating profits in there. So no change on that. Next question is on installing solar panels. Where do we record it? How do we do it? Again, and maybe I could turn this over to Ralph, and then in a moment. Again, a lot of this will depend on the relationship with the solar power panels. These could get complicated. In some cases, they could be leased out, where you work out a sharing agreement with a third-party vendor who installs the solar panels on a roof, and you're leasing it out and sharing some of the cost load there. In some cases, you could be purchasing the solar panels. In that case, the solar panels will likely be capitalized, and then the benefit will be recorded in EWW. And this is where we broaden the renewable energy section in the EWW section here. So it depends on a lot of factors, but this is something that we're seeing more and more in the industry. And Ralph, maybe you could talk about maybe some of the things you're seeing.
Yeah, so in terms of renewable energy, very much agree with your comment, Ray. It depends on whether you're buying and doing the install yourself, or whether you're leasing the panels. But the production from the panels, right, is whether it goes back to the grid, as it does in most cases. You'll find that there's credits for this renewable energy, and those will become very important as we track those going forward, because they offset other sources of purchased energy, and help justify and provide the data to support claims around your energy use from various sources. So again, on a go-forward basis, is it a capital expense or is it a lease cost? And then where do the credits flow through to? So all important, and I think we've considered those within the new recommendations. Thank you.
Next question, and this is for Amy, directed to Marriott, is Amy, how have the major brands approached sustainability and the reporting standards, and any suggestions for how a small or medium brand or manager should approach this? You're on mute. Gotcha.
Thank you. Gosh, I said before, we need to have some large banking system across the world for $10 every time you don't unmute. But anyway, it's a pretty broad question. And I think the first thing when you say sustainability reporting, that is such a deep pool, right? So as I mentioned before, we're reporting to our corporate customers, but then we also have all of these, external indices that, whether it's Wall Street or SASB or there's just a long list of, standards that you can be reporting to. And so I think really the first step is to go through, that universe, whether you're, seeing them yourself, getting specific requests, your customers are your customers are requesting it, but really understand, what's material to your business and what can you actually sufficiently report on based on the data that's available to you. So every year we run through an exercise, and it fluctuates that we're reporting out to anywhere from, 8 to 12 or 15 different indices. As I mentioned again, that number of 270 will likely grow well into the 300s. And so I think just managing the scale of reporting is the first thing, because even if you have the best and most accurate data, you do need resources in order to get that data into these, various requesting bodies. So I think that's really the first thing. I think, Ray, you had mentioned before that, not all companies have massive sustainability, database and systems that kind of crunch this data and help you manage that. In lieu of that, I think, simple reporting tools, with the guidance from EWW and other resources to just make sure you have that information clearly accounted for and then easily accessible. So I think my last best practice is to really identify, the responsible party for this information, but also understand that it's not just engineering, right? It's not just one, team at the hotel. Likely some of these reporting requests really span across culinary and rooms and, the GM. I mean, there's really just a lot of information that needs to be compiled. So understanding that you do need a person to manage your program, but also understanding that it really is a team effort in order to make sure that you're able to answer all the questions that may be beyond, quantitative data into other areas. So kind of leaving the financial realm for just a second, but sustainability reporting has grown so much, and so understanding that universe is broad and having the resources in place to establish a healthy reporting program.
Sure. Well, thanks, Amy. And also to add on what Amy mentioned earlier about the importance of working together here as an industry, it really is important. That's why we think this is so important, and that all the hotel industry, we get to report common metrics and we stick together. So we develop these standards. And the reason that's important is because all the other asset classes are already getting together. The office industry, they've gotten together their standards, and guess what? When they report their sustainability metrics, and what they're going to the cities to suggest is things like the carbon emissions for the customer coming to their office to visit with them. They're trying to push it off to the hotel industry, because they're saying, well, the person walked across the street from the hotel, I have zero cost on that. That the person flew from London to New York, and they stay at the hotel. The hotel's cost should have that. So that's where we have to have a common voice, and metrics are all reporting together, both for government entities as well as to our customers. And this is something also we're expecting that Smith Travel will certainly gain some level of reporting here. One is by tracking reporting on some of the RevPAR stats, our sustainability. One is it allows an owner and an operator to understand how are you doing versus your peer set. That can identify opportunities that maybe you're not doing something that your peers are. And guess what? If your peers are doing a better job on the sustainability measures, they're going to probably get more customers, because as Amy pointed out in these RFPs, they're going to start asking for what all you're doing. You're going to start having more metrics to report on. And if you're not tracking that, but your peers are, they're going to have an advantage over you. So I think that's coming along. Some other brands and managers are doing a great job here. I was in San Francisco earlier this week, and I was with Starboard Hotels. The One Hotels and that brand, they're doing a phenomenal job in sustainability. It's part of their DNA. So these are things that more and more hotels are going towards as we're looking at. Okay, so we have a few more minutes before we run out here. Next question, I think, Ralph, this is for you. The question is, there are a lot of new standards and reporting requirements in EWW. Our hotel doesn't have employees who are specialized in this area. So how do we track and compile all this information?
Well, I mean, we've tried to design this so that we could do this with more or less with the existing staff we have. So, I mean, as well as compiling financial information from the utility accounts, if you will, we're also going to be recording and tracking the consumption information. And you know, that's the first piece in gathering both blocks of information, to be able to start to do some trend analysis with the metrics, and that. You know, we want to be careful that we capture things into the right boxes, and so where there is renewable energy versus non-renewable energy, that it goes in the right boxes. That's going to take a wee bit of training, but we don't see this as being onerous and requiring more people. We just want to make sure that we expand our, in the simplest form, you know, we can track some of this data in our general ledger, just like we set up accounts that aren't necessarily numeric as much, but we could track consumption by kilowatt hours or BTUs or whatever, right in some other accounts within our general ledger. We don't even need to stick it in a separate system so that we have it. There are accounts that we do that with today. And so, I mean, just expanding the use of the tools we have will enable us to be able to comply with this and have the information.
All right, thanks, Ralph. I think this is time for our last question. This question for the GFC is, the changes from utilities to EWW are quite a bit. What about the other sections? When will we be able to see the highlights of the changes in these other sections? Good question. So one thing we're really trying to make a big concerted effort with the 12th edition here is to get exposure drafts out for the various sections to all the major associations on the hotel side. So these different associations can have time to review it, have questions, listen feedback, and get it back into the committee. So this is the first piece, EWW. We wanted to get it out because it does represent some of the larger changes. So we wanted to give the industry more time to review and provide feedback. But we do have a schedule for the other sections, and they're slated to come out up in the coming months. I know Ralph is leading the communications on that. So maybe Ralph, you can maybe touch upon some of the highlights of what to expect over the next 3 to 6 months with the new sections and how they're going to be introduced.
Okay, Ray. So the anticipation is that there's probably going to be between either 5 or 6 exposure draft processes with different section updates. We think that will encompass most of the major changes and enable us to send out an exposure draft. So EWW is live. There won't be another one before Christmas. And so we get back, maybe mid-January, we'll start with the second. And then we hope that about every 3 weeks or so, we'll be able to get another exposure draft out, give folks time to comment, bring those comments back, and as we finalize those sections for inclusion in the 12th edition.
Well, thank you. And again, I think what we've learned from when we published the 11th edition is the industry didn't, we think, have enough time to adapt other areas, which is why, as Ralph mentioned, we're trying to do a good job communicating each section out, providing a mechanism to provide feedback and questions on these areas, and then to get this published in 2022. And that way we have really 2 full years to get ready for it. So the idea is by the time we get to our 2024 budgeting season, the hotel managers and brands and owners will be able to incorporate this into their budgeting process. So plenty of time. So we look forward to it. And as we mentioned earlier in section, there is a EWW exposure draft that's available. I know HFTP has access to that. So certainly if you reach out to them or reach out to any of us here on the panel, we'll get you copies. We appreciate everyone's participation in today's webinar. I think this is very a landmark move for the hotel industry, and we're really excited about it. And we look forward to moving forward on this, and we look forward to the 12th edition and making progress there. So thank you everyone for joining, and I thank everyone on the panel, Agnes, Ralph, Eric, and Amy for joining us, and also thank you HFTP for hosting this. It's been very informative.
Well, yes, thank you very much for, being a speaker today and providing the updates on the 12th edition for the EWW section. As Ray said, the exposure draft is available. It is on the HFTP website under USALI. We will also send out an email tomorrow to everyone who attended, which will have any continuing education credit information on that email. So, and as Agnes talked about with the HFTP Academy and the USALI certificates that are offered there, with this new exposure draft coming out, we do have a December special, and that's up on your screen right now. So once again, thank you, everyone. It's been a great webinar. Appreciate your time. And at this time, I'll go ahead and conclude today's presentation. Thank you again.